John? Annie? Aaron? Okay. All right, we were talking about theories of motor development, umbrellas, and we had discussed maturational theories, right? The idea that motor development, motor behaviors are driven by the maturation of the central nervous system, all right? And that environment, personality, all these other things doesn't play a role, okay? And then we did a brief, simple model of information processing. Anybody got any questions on the information processing since it's had a chance to soak in a little bit? Okay. All right, and so our third umbrella is ecological, prospective ecological theories, and our constraints theory is going to sit under this umbrella. It's a version of an ecological theory, all right? And in ecological theories, we say that development, in our case motor development, is driven by the interaction of the individual and their environment, and in our case the task, the skill that we're asking them to do, and the goal of that skill, right? So lots of systems play a role. All our systems are developing at different rates. They all are going to interact with the kind of movement behavior that you would see if you're using this theoretical perspective, right? One of them may be more influential at one time than another system, but they all play a role. So we're going to take a brief look at the idea of dynamical systems. That's where constraints theory really comes from. Right? It's an easier, more useful version of dynamical systems. And dynamical systems was developed, the theory that we use in motor development was developed in the early 80s, and it's based in an even more complicated idea that they use in astrophysics. And under dynamical systems, the idea is that we see spontaneous self-organization. So we see this skill emerge because of the interaction of what's going on. Okay? And if you think about your body, your skeleton and your muscular system, then this idea, you can picture it. I've got a lot of ways of moving, given my skeleton and my muscular system. When I'm younger, as my skeletal system develops, I change the way I walk, or whether I can walk, based upon the maturation of the skeletal system. Right? As humans, our hip sockets, our femurs, the muscular attachments that we have, encourage us as adults to walk on 2 feet. Right? It's easier, it's the most sensible organization of the system given our structure versus still creeping on 4 limbs or scooting along on our butt. Right? as an adult, the hip socket and the femur in our muscular system drive walking on 2 feet. So that's the movement that we typically see emerge. It self-organizes amongst the system. So the idea is it's not just driven by the central nervous system, that the way you're structured kind of organizes itself into a movement behavior. Mechanically, that's quite an interesting idea, because if you film people doing the same skill, and you slow that film down and you really analyze it, we don't actually, when you look at it minutely, do it the same, right? So this is a way of kind of trying to explain the fact that even though we all have 2 legs, we don't walk quite the same way, because we self-organize. Yes, we all have femurs. Yes, we all have muscles that insert into the femur and into the hip, and we can contract them. But muscles are different lengths. Tendons are different lengths. The insertion point can be different on the bone, which changes the mechanics for a particular individual versus someone else. Right? And so the skill doesn't look identical. If it was driven by the central nervous system and it was hardwired, we'd all look identical. So not being hardwired also gives us a lot of advantage and a lot of flexibility, because it means not only can I walk, and walking is the most reasonable self-organization, but I can change my walking based upon the interaction with the environment. If it was hardwired and there was only one way to do it, then when I transfer from pavement onto ice, I can't change how I walk. But because it's not hardwired, it's soft-wired to some extent, then I can alter the pattern, I can re-self-organize based upon the interaction with the slippery surface. So you can start to see, when you think about it like this, where the constraints triangle came from. Right? And constraints, as I say, it's just I like it. It's simpler. Okay? But self-organization is a very interesting idea. So everything is going to interact, and based upon the interaction within the system, within the body, within the person, as well as the interaction with the environment and the task, I'm going to see a particular movement emerge or self-organize. And that helps also for us when we're thinking about change we see across the lifespan. If we throw out the idea that adults don't change, right? That motor development is a childhood issue, that motor skills are learned as children and we don't change as we get older. Now I'm old and crinkly, I look back and I go, how did we ever think that in the first place? Because clearly I don't move the same way I did 20 years ago, right? So it's always a little surprising to me that when we look at the old theories that they went there in the first time. So we want to think about some systems develop more slowly. As we get older, certain systems are going to start to break down earlier than other systems. Okay. So the fact that the systems continue to change across the lifespan also, if we use this theoretical perspective, helps us explain why we see movement changes across the lifespan. this is just a picture representation. A lot of us have issues trying to organize verbal information to make it make sense. So if we look at it visually, it helps us out a little bit. If this is my muscular system, say, then my pattern of movement isn't exactly based on that one system. This may be my digestive system. It's already mature, it doesn't change. This could be my skeletal system. Right? It has a period where it doesn't change very much, has a period where it changes a lot, and another period where it doesn't change very much. But they all interact to drive the pattern, the picture that I see when I watch someone move. Yeah? Go back. I lost rate limiters somewhere. Where's my rate limiters? Oh. Okay. All right, so under dynamical systems, there's an idea about something we call a rate limiter. Okay. A rate limiter is the system that develops. Are you going to go down the wrong way, Sarah? Twit. The system that develops the slowest, the last. So it could be the muscular system at a certain point in time. So for young children, their skeleton is probably strong enough and dense enough to stand up and walk by 7 months. But their muscular system isn't developed enough, their strength isn't developed enough to stand up and walk. So strength becomes the rate limiter for a young child and walking. If you look at adults, right? So if you went, let's see, if you went to England on holiday and you had the opportunity to play cricket, what might be the rate limiter that would hold back your development in cricket? It's not probably going to be your strength, skill, cognition, right? Your cognitive understanding of cricket is behind your physical development. So your cognitive development, your understanding of that skill is behind everything else. So your cognitive system, your understanding, your knowledge base might be the rate limiter in that case. Okay. So rate limiters change depending upon the person, the skill you're asking them to do, the point in time in their life. But you see that term rate limiter quite a lot. It's just another constraint. It's the one that's holding back the development of the skill at any particular time. The other branch of dynamical systems that there's been a lot of research looking at is the idea of perception and action. And when we start looking at visual development and visual perception and how that interacts with learning skills, a lot of the research that we understand, a lot of what we know about how visual development and depth perception interacts with movement is based upon the work from this kind of era, right? And in perception action, they talk about an affordance for a skill. An affordance is the environment provides people the opportunity to move. So my environment affords me an opportunity to move, or doesn't afford me an opportunity to move. And the interesting thing then when we look at affordances is it's very personal. Right? It's based upon my individual perception of the environment. And so we have, let's see, if I have a flight of stairs at a shopping mall, right? And the best shop in the mall is on the second floor. And I'm there with my mum, who doesn't climb stairs anymore. But the elevator, that's the word. Elevator's out of action. Thank you. Right, the elevator's out of action. So the only way to get up to the best shop is climbing the stairs. So the environment is exactly the same for me and my mum, the given setup, right? But that environment affords me the opportunity to climb the stairs and go to the shop. And it does not afford my mum the opportunity to climb the stairs and go to the shop, right? Because her perception of the environment is, I can't climb the stairs, therefore I can't go to the second floor, right? But the environment didn't change. The affordance is personal. It's based upon an individual's perception. That's an interesting idea, I think, as a teacher. We'll come back to the body scale point in a minute, because we often, as movement teachers, set up a practice or set up a drill that we think is going to help someone based upon our perception of the skill. And then the drill doesn't work quite the way we expected it to, right? Because maybe it didn't afford the person we were trying to teach the same opportunity it afforded us, right? We've got to think outside our box. It's always difficult to remember when you're good at something what it feels like to not be good at that thing. And so we quite often will set up a practice and we're like, okay, this will work, this is good, right? This is a good stepping stone to learning this skill. And it doesn't turn out to be a good stepping stone because we forget to take into account the other person's perception. So the concept of affordances can be quite a useful teaching tool. And the idea of things being body scale is to do with the size of things in the environment versus the person. So if we come back again to climbing stairs, right, typically we don't change a flight of stairs that we build in a house, right? We build the flight of stairs, they've got a particular rise, depth on them, and you walk up and down the stairs. You walk up and down the stairs as an adult like this, right? If you take your young nephew to visit your house, and he's only 2, how is he going to go up those stairs?
All fours.
On all fours, possibly? Yeah? That would work, right? Why does he go up on all fours and not walk up one step after the other?
Stability.
Okay, stability. And he's too little, right? His legs are too short in comparison to the height of the step. So he can't do that, it's much more effective for him to go up on all fours. Right? But you wouldn't go up on all fours unless you were goofing around playing. Because it affords you, because it's scaled to the length of your leg. So your perception of the stairs means you're going up one step, alternate feet. We do that with kind of a similar idea to what we were talking about with adjusting the equipment. Okay? If I give someone a tennis racket that is way too big for them, then what I see, because I didn't scale the racket to their body, I see a different movement occur. So the function that we perceive something affords us is instinctively, it's unconscious. You're not necessarily thinking, oh yeah, well of course I'm going to walk up the steps 1 foot at a time, right? You don't think about that, you just do it. I snapped my Achilles and it didn't fix very well. So coming downstairs for me sometimes is problematical, because if the stairs are not very deep and I try to come downstairs normally, I have a whacking great lump of scar tissue on the back of my ankle, and I catch it on the stair as I try to step on the stair, and that hurts. So if the stairs are very shallow, I go downstairs sideways, one at a time. Or I hold very tight onto a railing, because I have to put my foot half off the stair in order not to catch my ankle on the edge. Right? So you would watch me coming downstairs going, what the hell is Dr. Wall doing? That's very peculiar, because I'm going, right? Because my perception of that environment is that that's too shallow. I can't put my whole foot on that step, so I'm going to be careful going down the stairs because I don't want to slip. So it's all just information to help you try to explain what you're seeing, because that's your job as a movement teacher. I've got to be able to explain what I'm seeing in order to put it right. Right? In order to come up with a good idea to help this person correct their movement, I have to understand what I'm seeing in the first place. So, whether I'm looking at something that's dynamical systems research or perception action research, both these ideas kind of throw away the concept that the central nervous system is controlling everything that I'm seeing. And that's the kind of big point. The control of the skill, the organization of the skill is a combination of all the systems working together and cooperating together as a unit. Right? The skill that emerges is going to be cooperative action. So it just has the development of this third umbrella allowed motor development researchers to take a different approach. And so we've got more research. It's, you know, I can look at a question I couldn't answer previously and maybe come up with something that explains it a little bit for us. Just gives us another way of approaching a problem that we're dealing with. Right? That's all. That's all they do. That's all the theory is for. So, our three instances, think about, well, we discussed what a maturationist would say. We had an idea about how I would explain this from a computer-based information processing approach. Now how would I explain what I'm seeing if I use an ecological approach? Right? It's not a question of I'm only ever going to use ecological theory. It's how many tools do I have when I'm looking at something, which tool helps me explain it the best and gives me a clue how to be a better teacher. That's really the be-all and end-all from it. So on page 27 in your textbook, one of the great things they have done with the new version of the textbook, they have a super website now. The website used to be absolutely ghastly, but it's much better now. They've put a lot of work into the website, and they've got a lot of lab activities that help you understand the material in the chapter, right? Now, because our lab session is being used to go out and hands-on work with the children, we don't have a lab session for you to do your activities. I'm suggesting that you, as part of your study, attempt some of these lab activities. In particular, I would have a go at the one on page 27 to help you get your head around this idea of affordances. All right? So you go to the web study guides. Anybody tried dealing with the website yet? Not yet. Okay. So let me give you a couple of tips, because Human Kinetics, I don't think have changed their process, and it's a little twisted. What you have to do for Human Kinetics, if you've had a Human Kinetics textbook in a previous class, and you have a Human Kinetics class code, you'll need that to get in, right? If you have not used Human Kinetics before, you will need to create a user account at the Human Kinetics website. Doesn't cost you anything, you just have to create a user account, put your email in, create a password, right? That's your log into Human Kinetics. Once you're in Human Kinetics, you will have to create your access to the textbook, which is where you use your key code. Right? So you go to the textbook website, and it will say log in or create access, and you'll use your key code to create your login for the textbook. Okay? So just so you understand how that works, if you don't have a Human Kinetics login, you have to do that first, otherwise you won't be able to get your key code situation to work properly. Okay. Once you go to the website, do you want to have a look at that? Would that help, rather than me blurbing? Alright, so it'll tell you when you get in there, to access your resources you have to create an account first. Once you're registered with Human Kinetics, then you can sign in and put your key code in. once you get to, I don't know if you'll get instructor guide, it's recognizing me. You will get access to this web study guide. Which now comes up looking like this. It should give you access also to the quizzes so that you can practice quiz questions, right? Once you're here, you can click on a chapter, and then it has a button for a lab activity. This chapter only has the one. Some of the chapters have more than one. When we get on to the chapters where we're looking at development of skills, they have lots of film clips for you to practice looking at skills and seeing what the difference is between skills. So it's a very useful study tool for you guys, and we need to be able to look at the film a lot in order to practice getting better at seeing problems. So they've got an introduction and instructions for that lab, and then they have the questions for you to answer. Everything comes up in a Word document, so you shouldn't have any problems. Right. Use your resources. And the nice thing about lab activities is they make stuff very hands-on and much more real for you. You know, just reading the textbook, I don't know about you, but I don't learn very much if all I do is just read. I have to scribble diagrams and draw myself flow charts and make bullet lists, and well, if I've got a lab activity, I have to do less of that because I'm learning the material while I'm playing with the activity. So use the tools that are given to you. The back of the chapters have some questions to kind of make you think about what you read in the chapter, what we did in class. Okay. They've got learning exercises, they've got a couple of little questions. Whether or not you want to answer the question fully is up to you, it's your study. But I would say, if you look at those questions and you go, I don't even know what that question is talking about, right? If you look at question 3 and it says, why should physical educators be interested in affordances? I'm not saying, because you're in control of your time allocation, right? How you study is based upon how much time you think you've got or you're willing to give it. But if I look at that question and I go, I don't have any idea why they would need to know. A, I can't remember what affordances are, and B, I don't have any idea why a teacher would need to know them. Then you've got a problem. Okay? That's a big red flag on your study notes, because you should know that by the time you finish that chapter. Or at least have an idea what it's talking about, even if you can't give a good, strong, detailed answer. You shouldn't be looking at it going, I don't know what that even means. Okay, does that, right? You shouldn't. So use the tools to help you study. Because generally at this level, at a 200 level class, you guys have not developed very strong study skills yet. And you have to get that sorted out, because from here on in it gets harder. Right? This class gets harder, your next class will get harder, everything else you have to take in the rest of the program gets harder. If you can't work out the best way to study for yourself that works for you, it may or may not be part of a group. Me, I can't study with a group, I have to do it on my own. Some people do better working with 2 or 3 friends where they can ask each other questions. right? You've got to work it out for yourselves. I can't do that for you. But use the tools you've got. You've paid for the book, hopefully. Everyone's got the book. If you haven't, get it, because it's required, not suggested, okay? Use the tool. You paid for it. Use it. Okay? It's a very good learning tool. Alright? If you're not sure of a good way to study, come and talk to me. I might be able to suggest something. As I say, everybody has to find their own way. It took me ages. When I was your age, I was terrible. I flunked a lot of exams in undergrad. Right? Partly because I was too busy training and coaching, and partly because I thought if I just read and read and read and read, I would pass an exam, except I would get in the exam and not be able to write anything. Okay? So it takes time to find out what works for you from a study perspective. Right? But don't just ignore the resources that you've got to hand, because that's not smart, right? They've put a lot of effort into trying to make this user-friendly and set it up in a way that helps you learn. So take advantage of it. All right? Question. So think about your life, all right? And start trying to integrate some of this material. Be thinking about what constraints, all kinds, individual constraints, environmental constraints, what constraints have played a role in the movement choices you now make and the way you move now. Because if you personalize it, it's easier to start to get to grips with it. Right. Question? No questions? Oh my God, that must be brilliant.